The sea at the edge of the world lay like a slate unmarked, its color so absolute that the sky above seemed paler for shame. Aegon stood beneath the furled sails with his hands upon the rail, feeling the cold iron through the leather of his gloves and the pulse of the hull as the tide slid them inward. The air smelled of tar and kelp and something faintly metallic, a scent he would come to know as the breath of Asshai, the odor of old stone that refused the light. He had not slept. The watch had been quiet, the crew Valerians for the most part, with their pale hair bound against the wind and their talk kept to brief, practical sounds. The captain said little to him. They were men accustomed to dangerous harbors and untasted waters. They knew where they were taking him. In the darkness before dawn, a shadow passed across the ship, a turning of wind without wind, a cold that prickled the scalp, and even the captain had bowed his head. Somewhere above the cloud, Balerion was circling, his absence louder than any wing beat. There were men who hooted and called to their hawks, but a man with a dragon learned a different discipline. Aegon did not summon. He waited. If the Black Dread wished to be seen, he would be seen. If not, there was a kind of reverence in being overlooked. The first sight of the city came like a stain upon the sky, a kink in the straight horizon. Towers rose without taper, as if the rock had been poured and allowed to harden in thick-downed lumps.
No penance flew, no windows gleamed.
The nearer they drew, the more the stone confounded the morning. It drank the faint light greedily, so that the sea around the piers was a rippled reflection of darkness, and every gull that wheeled overhead flashed like a broken white blade, then vanished when it passed the line of shadow. "Asshai by the shadow," said the captain, not to him but to the habit of making a mark of arrival. He spat toward the water and let it be. Crewmen went about their work in a hush that was not fear, exactly, but something older, like the quiet in a septri when the prayers have not yet begun and the candles are being set in order. The ropes creaked. The ship eased toward a pier whose posts glistened as if oiled. Aegon could see the marks cut into them. Not words he knew, not Valerian or Volantene or any trader's script, but strokes that seemed to loop back upon themselves and bar their own escape. The dockhands wore masks. Some were of black lacquer shaped to fit the face smooth as bark. Others were veils that let nothing through but the faint suggestion of cheek and jaw when they turned. Aegon had been told of it and had told himself not to stare. Nevertheless, there is always a newness to the first moment of a thing previously described. He kept his hands upon the rail until the gangplank thumped into place. The captain's second came and waited a measured instant for him to descend first. He did. The planks shook under his boots in that subtle way that one feels in their knees rather than on the sole. The smell of the river ash met the sea here. It had an iron cold to it, and a weight held in the nose longer than the breath, as if the scent itself wished to remain. Aegon wrapped his cloak closer. The wind off Dragonstone was salt and busy. Here the air felt heavy with observation. There were no shouts from fishmongers, no laughter at the unloading of barrels. The port made only the sounds required by motion, the thud of wood, the slide of rope, the mild clatter of hooks, and each of those seemed half swallowed by the stone it touched. A figure waited at the foot of the pier, tall, robed in layered black that fell without rustle, face masked in the lacquer that had been burnished to a dull, absorbing sheen. The shape could have been man or woman. The mask let nothing of the eyes escape but what the onlooker imagined. Next to that stillness, a lamp burned, though the dawn had broken enough to make it unnecessary. The flame was a tight oval with no flutter. He wondered if there were a shell of glass around it, unseen. "Lord of Dragonstone," the figure said. The voice found the pitch of the morning and did not jar it. "You have been seen." "By whom?" A pause that suggested a smile behind wood. "By what you came to find." "I came to learn. And to pay," the figure said.
"Come."
"The price is not owed yet, but it is easiest to bear when one has not counted it too many times." Aegon glanced back. The captain was delegating. Men had set to unloading the cargo that purchased uncertain passage. Casks of wine, cloth of velvet, several chests of coin. He had brought what would tempt and what would not cause regret to lose, a calculation learned at council tables and in bedchambers both. Above, He felt rather than saw the turn of great wings. The shadow moved across the unfurling morning and made the dockhands lift their heads without breaking their motion. He gave a single raised palm to the sky. Not a command, not a plea, an acknowledgement. Then he followed the masked figure. Asshai revealed itself as a city that had forgotten the habit of noise. The streets were broad enough to wheel a wagon, yet few wagons rolled there. The houses and halls leaned, not forward as if eager, nor back as if withdrawn, but inward upon themselves. Doors were tall and narrow. When they passed beneath an arch where a great bone had been set along the stones in a curve, whale or something larger, blackened by time. Aegon felt his neck incline of its own accord, as if in respect. The masked figure went ahead with a measured pace that was neither slow nor swift, the pace of someone who knows the way and knows that they cannot be hurried by others' urgency. The river banded the city like a dark ribbon. Barges moved along it, guided by poles that touched the water with a care that seemed more gesture than force. The river's surface did not take light. It held reflections like secrets remembered precisely, refusing to let them soften. On a stair that fell into the water, a woman knelt to fill a jar. Her skin was so pale it seemed to be saying it had once known color but had decided otherwise. The veil over her face was thin as dragonfly wing, yet he could not make out her eyes. "You expected more spectacle," the masked guide said. "I expected less silence. Spectacle is for those who cannot bear to imagine what goes on. We have less use for it." Without looking back, the guide added, "I am called Nares. It is not the first name I have had, but it is the one that will serve you." Aegon's hand felt for the weight of the dagger at his belt. The blade was old and of good work, a bit of his father's hoard, one of those practical pieces hidden in the back of the chest while the showy ones gleamed for guests. He did not touch the hilt, only verified the heft with that small brush of hand that is not quite a gesture. "Your dragon flew," Nares observed, as if remarking upon the weather. "He will not come down among these streets. He will if I wish it. We will not be asking for what you wish." Aegon did not answer. He had learned to be misread without immediate amendment. People accustomed to being obeyed often gave away more in their corrections than in their commands. They walked down a long avenue where statues rose at intervals. He could not say with certainty what they were meant to be. There were faces there, yes, and wings, and coils that might have been serpentine. But the stone's habit of taking the light, holding the light, sullenly refusing to share it, made each line both sharp and unsure. He found himself cataloging proportions because the forms themselves would not be held in memory. This one's wing had 3 folds. That one's mouth was a deep well where shadow had pooled. He wondered if drawing them would be any better, but suspected the ink would drink itself along the same lines and leave him with curiosity satisfied only in the moment of looking. They came at last to a building whose door was cut higher than any he had seen. The lintel stone was so dark the light above it seemed like frost that had been breathed upon. Nares placed a hand upon the door not as one who asks, but as one who introduces. The door opened inward with a sound too deep to be a creak. It was like the resonance one feels in the bones at a shore temple when the waves are loud beyond. The chamber within was not large. The height made it seem so, and the way the shadows hung made it seem more so. But when he walked, he counted his steps and found the span modest. Lamps were set along the perimeter, their flames held breathless. A bowl of ebon glass sat upon a pedestal in the center, and within it lay something that could have been water but was not. Surface without fluid, mirror without reflection. Nares stood beside the pedestal, hands folded. "We gather the light here," they said, "and then we teach it to answer questions." Aegon looked into the bowl. He saw his own features only as the suggestion of a man leaning, as if the world were a sketch that had not yet had time to be inked. He made himself blink, a deliberate closing and opening of the eyes. Sometimes a body must be reminded to be reasonable. "Questions," he said. "Of a certain kind?" Nares's head inclined. "Of a certain price. What prices are common?" "Names," Nares said, "and their edges, the sound of them and the weight of them." the way they fit in the mouth of one who fears them and one who loves them. The world is bound by knots. Some we can loosen, some we can pull tight. The first lesson is to know which you are doing. And my dragon? Your dragon is a knot old before you had a word for it, and before your grandfather had a father. You cannot untie him. You may tie yourself to him. You have begun. I have flown him. That is not the same, Nares said. One can be carried by what will destroy one, so long as one keeps a good seat. Aegon did not smile, though he wanted to. He had expected condescension. He had thought to meet some fevered prophet who would try to purchase his attention with prediction. Instead, he was being tested at the correct level. There was comfort in that. He would not have to pretend to be more credulous than he was. How do you teach light to answer? He asked. We use darkness, Nares said. It is the only thing that persuades. The lessons began without announcement. Aegon had known swordmasters who loved to demonstrate the first cut in a flourish that made the student burn to match it. He had known singers who said they would not teach a note until the pupil had shown devotion. He had known priests who wept before they let their novices sweep the stones. Nares had none of that. He was shown the bowl and told to stand at certain distances from it at certain hours. He was shown a script that was not a script, gestures that were not quite gestures. He was given a shard of something like glass and told to hold it in his left hand for a day, and then in his right for a day, and then in his teeth for an hour. He was given a name for a place he had never seen and told to think it until it lost sound, and then until it found a new sound inside his mouth entirely. He was made to listen to his own breath until his own breath sounded like someone else's. Between these tasks, which had the maddening quality of being both precise and unexplained, there was the city. Aegon walked it when he was told to walk it within the boundaries set because there were boundaries and because he was not a fool. Some streets could be taken by any. Others were marked by signs set above head height, signs that to his eye appeared as nothing but smudges of dull ink upon the dark. He learned their shapes the way a sailor learns reefs, by charting where he had nearly been wrecked. In one lane, a woman sat with a cage full of spheres that moved like living ink. When children reached for them, she tapped the bars with a long nail and the spheres stilled, flattening their motion into something that resembled patience. In another, a man with a bronze mask hammered upon a plate that appeared to want to cry out, yet made no sound, its distress visible only in the way the air around it rippled. He tried the food. He would not later be able to say what he had eaten for certain. A broth in which bone gleamed like polished ivory, a bread that left a black smudge upon the tongue that took an hour to fade, a fruit that had no seed but seemed to have contained a seed that had decided to be elsewhere. He did not sicken. He had been careful where he drank and more careful with whom. The water that looked clearest was not always the water one wished to swallow. He wrote letters by candlelight when he was allowed flame. To Visenya, whose words were a blade that never dulled. To Rhaenys, whose laughter he could hear in his bones when the night pressed down upon the roof. He did not write what he was learning. He had not the words for it and suspected that committing such things to paper in so soft a script would itself be a form of offense. But he wrote the way the city seemed to himself. He described the hush and the lamps that burned without tremor, and the way that even his dragon's shadow seemed to slow when it passed above the black stone. He folded those letters and sealed them with the signet he wore, and entrusted them to the captain when the ship was ready to depart. The man took them in silence. The look they exchanged admitted all the unknowns between here and home. If the letters reached Dragonstone, they would be salt-streaked and months old. If they reached at all, at night, on the roof of the hall where he was permitted a chamber that faced toward the river, he would see him, Valyrian against the moon, vast and mild as a god at rest. The dragon would turn a single circle and vanish. Aegon would feel the stone cool under his bare feet and remember very carefully that he was not safe because of that. Safety was a habit that unmade princes. He had learned that early, in rooms with tapestries and the smell of old cedar, listening to older men speak of plans as if the plans were the world itself. The world was weather and knives and people who deserved more than plans could provide. He had told himself that when he crossed the narrow sea. He told himself again here. One morning Nares brought him to a market he had not entered previously. There the stalls were built from old bones, thick segments jointed with iron pins, and the goods were sealed in boxes of a pale wood that seemed to resent the touch. Nares paused at a table where jars stood under cloth and string. The vendor, masked though she was, had painted the cloth that hid her mouth with what might have been a smile. The jars were filled with powders that did not sit still. Each grain seemed to remember a different wind. "We will purchase names," Nares said, as if remarking upon the weather. "For practice." "What currency is accepted?" Aegon asked, opening the pouch he carried but keeping his fingers between the coins and the vendor's eye. A reflex learned in places where a glimpse of gold breeds decisions. Nares set 2 fingers upon his wrist, a light touch of advice rather than restraint. "Silver buys weight. Gold buys speed. Do not try to buy names with either." The vendor produced a shallow dish and placed it upon the table. Nares pointed to Aegon's throat. "Speak. Say who you are." There were a dozen answers to that if one were advising soldiers before battle or setting terms with a prince who wanted to overreach. In this place, the truth was not only what one had been told. Aegon let the list roll through his mind. The son of a lord whose name the histories would one day flatten. The rider of a dragon who would not suffer injustice or correction except by fire. The future of a house that had chosen stone over ruin. He settled on the one that had the least presumption and the most accuracy. "I am Aegon of Dragonstone," he said. His breath moved the powders in the dish. The vendor turned the dish as if it were a wheel. The powders resolved into a line that broke and rejoined, broke and rejoined. She pushed the dish toward Nares. "A thin name," she said. "This one keeps it in a sheath." Nares's masked face angled toward him. "Good. We will begin with thinner threads before we take the thick." "What do I purchase?" Aegon asked. "A token of what you have already spent," the vendor said, and poured a pinch of powder into a paper twist. It darkened the paper where it touched as if it bled through without wetting. "When you speak that name into a bowl of water on a night when no moon sees itself, it will show you the first shadow of the first step of the thing you are thinking about." Aegon paid with nothing. Nares had inclined their head, and the vendor inclined hers in return, their exchange invisible to him and sufficient. He tucked the paper twist into a pouch within his doublet, a place he kept free for the one thing he did not intend to misplace in a day. It lay there with a company of flint and a small, serviceable pencil. "What did I pay?" he asked when they had turned from the stall. "Attention," Nares said. "You will find you have less of it for 6 days. Do not allow yourself to be drawn into matters requiring intricate moves on those days, or you will lose. I have business here." "You have what you think is business," Nares said. "You came seeking lessons that do not forgive haste. Do not insult them by trying to do sums while they speak. You will not like what you get wrong." They were correct. In the days that followed, the city's quiet reached him through some woolen veil. He had the sense of things moving at the corners of his sight, and of missing them by the time he had turned. He dropped a spoon once without noticing until it rang against the flagstones. He picked up a lamp by the hot end and lifted it an inch before the pane fired. It was as if his mind had been given to someone else for a time with the promise it would be returned scoured and mended. He did not touch the paper twist. It was not fear. He respected the instructions of trades he did not yet speak. Instead, he spent the afternoon standing in the chamber with the bowl, feet apart by the width of his hips, hands loose by his sides, watching the knot water for long periods and then not watching it with equal diligence. Nares would stand at the corner of his awareness and correct only posture, only breath, never the content of his gaze. He began to sense when his attention had wandered. He began to learn to call it back without scolding it so harshly it refused to return. On the 7th night, that was the count he began with and recounted when he doubted, Nares came with a lamp to his chamber. "We will take the river," they said. They did. The barge rocked beneath their feet, though the river did not seem to move, but that was sensation. The poles that pushed them forward were thick. The men who moved them had their arms bound with cords and their faces covered to the eyes. The city slipped by in a uniform of black that had its own variety if one chose to look. This wall drinking more avidly, that corner permitting a bit of light to rest. Aegon had seen palaces in Myr and temples in Lys, and a ruined villa upon a hill where the lime still stuck in the cracks. Nothing of those places helped him speak the architecture of Asshai. The barge came to rest beside a flight of steps cut into the river's own edge. Nerys indicated the shore with 2 fingers and a small turn of the wrist. It was an elegant gesture. Aegon thought that in another life this person might have been the sort who poured wine in a lord's hall, making the service itself a lesson in economy. He stepped onto the stone. The cold came through the sole of his boot like a spoken thing. It felt like the hinge of a door that had not been moved in a long while. Above, the moon was a crescent that had been filed to sharpness. The sky here never seemed black. There was always a deep, dark gray to the heavens above Asshai, as if the world wished to admit ignorance but would not quite do so. Nerys led him along the shore to where a cove bit into the land. There the city wall leaned out above them, and above that darkness something flapped, something broader and slower than any bird. Aegon did not look up. There were times when to look was to be counted, and there are times one does not wish to be counted by anything not entirely understood. The cove held a basin of water, but when he crouched at its edge and touched a finger there, the surface bent without wetting. It offered the resistance of skin. "What is this?" he asked. "It is the ash without memory," Nerys said. "We bring it here and persuade it to forget what it is, to pretend to be something more obedient. The pretended is the beginning of the lesson." Aegon stood, wiped his finger upon his cloak because one always does something physical after touching the inexplicable. Nerys took from within their robe a length of black ribbon. "You came seeking a thing you will call magic," they said. "You have flown a dragon. You think fire is your element. That may be true, but the way you will use fire will be determined by how well you understand shade. And you will teach me this. I will show you where to stand so that the teaching can find you. That is all we ever do here. The teaching flows toward those places where the world has acknowledged its own limits." Nerys looked down, at least the mask inclined as if looking down, and set the ribbon across the basin's surface. It floated as if on oil. Nerys's hand hovered above it, 2 fingers raised. A priest's benediction turned into geometry. "Speak the name you gave us. You, who you believed yourself to be when you bought attention." Aegon spoke as he had before, though it felt different in this place. The ribbon shivered. A line of light crept along it, pale as dawn in fog. It stopped at the center and did not cross. "You have not yet learned to let yourself be cut," Nerys murmured, and the remark was neither insult nor praise. "Must I be cut? You carry blades," Nerys said. "You carry a very large one in the sky. Did you think you would only ever be the hand?" Aegon thought of wounds, of the ones he had taken and the ones he had avoided, of the scar on his left forearm that looked like a map of an island he had never sailed around. He thought of the others around a table, of the brother who had chafed against the duties that turned every boy into a man with a ledger of alliances and enmities whether he wished it or not. He thought of promises made in one season that had to be kept in another, of how sometimes keeping them left one poorer in a way that did not show on any tally. "What cut do you require? Give the name a piece of what it names," Nerys said. "Give it something it will not receive back. Then it will walk for you." Aegon set his hand upon his chest over the bone that felt most like a door. He took a breath and let it go and drew another. He spoke the name again, but this time he let it cost him. It is a very subtle art to spend out of the heart like coin. Not everyone can do it without taking too much. He had practiced with other currencies. Pride, affection, the slow hoard of patience one builds when dealing with spirited sisters and men who fancy themselves lords of climates they do not yet control. He coaxed a small sliver of that hoard to detach. He set it next to the name as if laying a knife beside a loaf. The ribbon flared at the middle and then subsided. The light ran along it to both ends and back. It coiled upon itself and became a small knot. Nerys lifted it out of the knot water and placed it upon Aegon's palm. It was warm. "When will it tell me anything?" he asked. "When you have an hour," Nerys said. "Do not compel it. Leave it on a table ere one candle has been burning for 6 hours. Then ask it to show you the walking of a man who has decided upon an act he believes himself too honorable to undertake. Aegon looked at the ribbon. Why that man? Because he will have made a bargain with himself that is more complicated than he can admit. Such bargains are the easiest to read at the beginning. And what will it show me? The first shadow of the first step of the thing you are thinking about, Nares said, and for the first time he heard kindness in the voice, not as sentiment but as accuracy offered gently. Will I be able to ask it other questions later? Nares turned their head toward him fully, and he felt the weight of gaze through the lacquer. It will answer that question now if you do not guard your expression. He guarded it, not by hardening, which often communicates more than a smile, but by letting his face be a quiet field on which weather happens. Nares inclined their head again and turned toward the steps. That night, because he had learned to follow instructions in foreign houses with the exactness of a guest, he set the ribbon upon a table in his chamber where one candle had burned for 6 hours. He had burned it because it had been burning. There are sequences one does not break even when one does not yet know their use. He sat with his hands upon his knees and watched the ribbon make small movements that were nearly a dancer's prelude. The positioning before the first step allows the body to be itself. He thought of a man he knew in Pentos, Solero of the first portico, who dressed his honor in gold braid and bought his mercy by the yard, and he asked the ribbon to show him how Solero would come to the gate he had sworn never to cross. What the ribbon did was not an image. It hummed. The sound changed only when he breathed, and then only subtly. He adjusted his breath the way one adjusts hand upon bow to keep the arrow from trembling. The sound became a line. The room felt deeper behind him. He kept his eyes upon the ribbon because that is how one keeps their attention from running behind them like a dog that thinks it has heard an intruder. The sound became a pattern. He saw Solero, not with eyes, but with that faculty with which one sees one's own hand reach for a cup when one's gaze is absent and the table is set as it always is. The pattern presented a step, a deed that would be trivial except that it was not. Solero would sign a letter with a hand slightly less practiced than his own, to spare the man who actually wrote it from shame. The letter would be to a woman he had slept with only once, and it would be crafted to seem as if it came from a petition she had not thought to make. He would do this because he wished to be honorable and could not bear to face the dishonor he had already arranged. Thus he would pass through the small gate on the way to the larger decision, and never notice the scuff upon his boot that showed the mud from the other side. Aegon drew a breath and let it clear under his tongue. He did not, he told himself, want this power for such gossip. He wanted to know the shape of resolve in those who could harm the world he wanted to make. He sat a while longer until the ribbon lay so still it might have been a dead thing. He pinched out the candle. The dark lay over him like legal cloth. He slept without dream. In the mornings, the city's markets were as subdued as they were in the afternoon. But the people moved with intention that had not yet been diluted by day. There were no children playing in the streets. He realized this after he had been there for weeks and did not know at first why the absence troubled him. There had been children in the free cities, boisterous with dogs and dust and the games that made men bury their coins when they were busy. Here, the few small forms he saw were being led somewhere by masked guardians. Their eyes, if they were visible, were not the eyes of those who have learned to braid laughter with breath. Asshai had made a contract with its future that included no noise. Nares took him beyond the walls once with 3 others who moved without speaking. The land rose in shoulders of stone. The light there had no purchase on the ground. It lay above like a cloth not yet spread. They came to a hollow where bones lay in a drift. Some were arranged, some were not. Wind moved across them, and where it touched they clinked like thin porcelain cups in a cupboard the house has forgotten to secure. This is where we will ask for wind when we need it, Nares said. You will not ask badly. I have ships, Aegon said, and it was not boast, only a notation upon a ledger. You had better, Nares said evenly. If you intend to move men across water without wind, you will be teaching them a prayer they will attribute to you. Do not ask for that. Men who learn to think you are the only prayer are not the men you will want. Is there another lesson here? Nares crouched, and even the gesture was a controlled spill of line, every angle modest. They drew a circle on the ground with a bone. It left a trail of ash as if the simple friction had been fire. "Listen," they said. Aegon listened. He heard wind, not loud. He heard the dry-tongued clatter of bones as the gust changed its hand. He heard the whisper of his own breath within his chest. A sound one learns in a tent when one must match the breath of a man one pretends to be sleeping near. And beneath the wind, he heard a sound that was not wind. It had a shape to it. If wind could be coaxed into thickening, that is what it would sound like. He did not know if there was a word for that sound in any tongue he had learned. "The land remembers," Nerys said, "not with the same fidelity as water, but it remembers where the winds have teeth and where they have not. You can teach them their own names the way one recalls a child by its nickname. Then they will come when you say it. They will not always stay. Too much impatience in you will remind them they are free." Aegon nodded. He was not inclined to much impatience when it could be helped. It had served him to notice when his desire to act was the desire to end discomfort rather than to achieve something precise. He filed away the notion of nicknames for winds. He wondered if the winds of the narrow sea would respond to the same coaxing. He wondered how many ships a man could move with what he had so far. "Do not ask for weather as a king would ask for fealty," Nerys said, as if hearing it flick through his mind. "Ask it as if you were asking your sister to pass the bread." He stood with the hill's slow time in his legs and looked out over the country that rolled toward the horizon like a beast's back. A long way off, nearer the city than they were but not much, something hummed under the ground, a sound that did not belong to stone. He looked toward it and did not see. He was learning to respect the city's habit of not rewarding the eye with what the gut knew. When they made their way down, he asked, "Why did the people of this place come here in the first place?" "There were people here before there were people there," Nerys said, gesturing to the world. "We are not those people. We are those who learned that certain things must be done where they can be done. And the price? It is not only attention." "No," Nerys said. "It is also the long habit of choosing not to cling to the small goods one could keep. The city asks that of us so the world can have what the city can do." They walked in silence the rest of the way. He thought of the small goods people like to keep. The smell of a woman's hair when she laughed over wine. The feel of a coin that one had not decided to spend but would because it was bright. The ease of telling a story so that it made one the hero of all the parts. He did not think of surrendering those. He thought of placing them upon a shelf with a cloth over them, knowing they were there, and turning to the business of making a continent kneel in such a way that it did not teach itself to hate kneeling. If he could do that, it would be because he had learned not to treat his desires as if they were plan and prophecy. One night, months and more than months after the arrival, Aegon woke to a light without flame. It filled his chamber as a tide fills a bay, not with a rush but with the insistence of the moon. He sat up. The ribbon he kept on the table was bright. It had unwound and lay in a long line that led from the table's edge to the wall and then, impossibly, continued up the wall as if gravity had paused to listen. He rose and went to it. The light was cold. It had nothing of fire in it. It smelled a little like the moment before lightning. He put his hand near it and felt the absence of heat and the presence of attention. He followed the line with his eyes to the ceiling where it coiled in a circle that was not quite complete. The circle twitched. It opened, not as a trap opens but as a mouth says the first syllable of a difficult word. The air shifted. His bones remembered the way the world shifts on Dragonback when one asks a dragon to fold a wing. "Do not touch," Nerys said from the doorway, softly and precisely, the way one speaks to a man who holds a blade very near a friend's neck. "Let it finish." "What is it?" Aegon asked, not looking away. "The part of your name that no longer belongs to you," Nerys said. "It has found a task." The circle closed. The light went out. The room remained changed. Something in the air had learned his shape and had decided not to forget it for a while. "What task?" he asked. Nerys's mask tilted. Listening in that way, the night listens after a thief has gone. "You will find that when you give a coin to a beggar and he uses it to buy a knife, you will still have bought the knife. This is not that, but it is near it. We have opened a door. The wind will know you better, but someone else will also know you heavier. Someone. Neressa's silence was a boundary. Do not ask to be told the names of what lives where you have not yet planted your feet. You will end up praying to them or bargaining too dear. Aegon had been offered sermons by men who wanted to secure his allegiance by making him fearful and grateful all at once. He knew the taste. This was not that. Neressa sounded like a navigator explaining a shoal to a captain who had walked the charts. He nodded. And now you will call your dragon, and you will try to land him. Aegon felt the tick of something in his throat, a responsive body to a request that had more implication than the words alone. He walked to the window and set his hand upon the sill. The stone took warmth from his palm. He did not call with voice. He had learned long ago that those who live with hawks shout only when theater is required. He found that quiet place in his chest where the sound of him and the sound of Balerion met as if they were two wells connected by an underflow. He made no mark. He simply stopped resisting the connection's pull. The city had few winds, but there was always the river's breath. He felt it lift. He felt the pressure the air makes when it does not wish to say what is moving through it. He did not look up until the shadow crossed the window and the roof groaned and he smelled heat. The dragon's head moved across the edge of the view, an eye like the memory of the first fire that ever burned in a human dwelling, accepting and untroubled by thought. Balerion turned his head and made a sound that people later would call a roar because people like everything to be a name they already own. It was more complex than a roar. It had a short section, a question, a longer one, an answer. It had a fall at the end that instructed those who listened that certain kinds of fear were no longer necessary. Land? Aegon said softly without breath, and the word was less command than invitation. Bol. Arion did not land. He set one foot upon the roof and lifted it again, as if testing the kind of stone. He circled and set another. The weight of him rolled through the beams. The lamps below flickered for the first time in the time he had been there. Neressa stood absolutely still until the dragon had made 3 contacts. And then they moved, a sliver of black within black, to the doorway as if preparing to exit should the roof cease behaving as roof. Do not promise safety, Neressa said. He knows when you are lying. Promise him that you will go where he can. Aegon did that. He did not know that he did it with words. He did it with the way he held his chest open and with the way he stepped up onto the sill and then onto the roof's edge, fingers on the eaves as if the house itself were a ladder. He did it with the way he permitted the fear of falling to offer him its usual counsel and then sent it outside without argument. Balerion came close enough that he could lay a hand along the warm scale at the base of the neck. The dragon's skin smelled of hot iron and ash, and beneath that of a more intimate thing, like the smell of a heated stone when rain hits it and the scent leaps up and is gone. The great head turned and the eye was near his shoulder, and then the dragon exhaled. A long rumble that shook the lit coals in a kitchen 2 streets away and made the water in the bowl in the chamber below shiver as if remembering it had once been river. Here, Aegon said, and the word was a knotted cord thrown to a friend upon another boat as the swells lift, and Balerion lowered himself a handspan. Aegon climbed. The roof did not protest. The dragon folded him into the hollow where neck becomes shoulder, and there he sat. And for a long time he did not ask for movement. Sometimes one must teach a place that one is content to remain. Then, with a breath matched to the dragon's, and with the patience learned from a masked teacher who asked for slivers of privately hoarded names, he asked Balerion to step down. The dragon did, foot by foot, as if walking upon unfamiliar and slippery rock. The yard below filled with heat and noise and the scurry of those who did not have the habit of staying where a giant places his hand. Balerion settled with the slow majesty of things that could crush and choose not to. The tail looped once and lay still like a quiet river. Neressa stood at the door, the mask turned. Good, they said. You untie yourself from fear better than most men who bring us coins and arrogance. I did not bring you coins, Aegon said. No, Neressa said, and that single syllable had an entire ledger's worth of annotation behind it. You brought a future you are certain of and asked us to teach you how not to ruin it by using it. Aegon did not answer because to answer would have placed a valuation upon their reading of him, and he was not ready to set that price. He slid down from the dragon and felt the ground with the thoroughness of a man who has not yet decided whether he trusts it. Balerion turned his head, lifting the nostrils to taste the air, and then leaned down. His tongue flicked the bowl of knot water within the chamber that had been moved to the yard in expectation of this plan. The surface took that small touch and turned it into a living thing. It shivered up and over the rim and then fell back into itself, and Nares made a small sound within the mask, the kind of sound one makes when a child does something beyond the lesson one has given. "He will change what you learn," Nares said softly. "I assume so," Aegon said, and felt the truth of it like the way a tattoo feels on the first morning. The skin discovering it is not only itself, it is message. In the weeks that followed, the lessons become more like maps. Nares did not draw them. Maps of ink and paper would have been an insult, and Aegon discovered that there are places for which 2 dimensions are a lie. Instead, they walked, up to the bones where the wind had teeth, down into a cellar where salt lay in wreaths upon the stones though no sea touched it, across a courtyard where each flagstone had been set as if each were the only one. They spoke to old things with the courtesy one gives titled men whose titles have outlived their usefulness, the courtesy that keeps the dance going without granting what it does not wish to lose. Aegon learned to call wind as one greets a neighbor, by their small name and by the little favor one can offer while asking the larger one. He learned to seat his mind upon the line of his breath like a rider upon a horse until the breath realized it was being watched and tolerated it. He learned that names can be thinned to threads and tied without breaking, but that sometimes they must be burnt into a knot for the knot to hold, and that burning a name is like burning a bridge that one once crossed to avoid drowning. One must not pretend the fire has only heat and no light. He failed. He failed in small and large ways that all felt the same in the moment. The heat going out of a room with an efficiency that left him dizzy. The wind arriving in such a manner that it turned a door inside out and nearly took a man's hand. The name he brought to a bowl that lay upon the surface and refused to sink because it had decided he did not mean it. Nares watched and adjusted and did not coddle and did not shame. It was like being taught swordplay by someone who knew the line of the blade better than the names of the men who had carried it. Once, tired and fed poorly and proud of a success that had been a thread, Aegon asked for more than he had been given leave to ask. He asked the water to show him a face he did not know. He gave it a piece of his name that was not as small as he thought it was. The water answered. It showed him not a face but an absence where a face should be, 2 hollows where eyes should sit, a line where a mouth should be, and within that line a depth as if the river itself had learned to be vertical. The lack reached up and took hold of him with fingers made of chill. He could not breathe. He could not call to Balerion because there is no call in a place where names have been looted. Nares's hand struck the side of his neck and woke something there. He fell backward, his heel catching a step, his shoulder taking a bruise he would carry for weeks. Nares stood over him with the bowl in their hands as if it weighed nothing. They set it down carefully upon the floor. "You asked for a thing you did not know," they said, and their voice shook not with fear but with the very precise anger of a teacher who has just spent the only coin they had hoarded for an emergency. "You are not a boy who believes he cannot die and so uses his body to prove it. Do not turn into one here." Aegon's throat burned where the cold had been. He could not reply for a long breath. When he did, he said simply, "I would undo it if I could." "You cannot," Nares said. "You have fed that absence a taste. It will not forget you. Be grateful that it is very slow." "What is it?" "A part of the ocean that understood question and answered by becoming more ocean," Nares said. "There are many schools for those who wish to pray to it. Do not attend them." He did not. He learned the boundaries thick and he learned the boundaries thin. He learned that when one makes a pact, one must write it upon a wall where one can see it when the hunger comes for more than one has been given. He learned to feel, in his hands and in his breath, the moment when ask becomes demand and how quickly the world punishes the crossing. Letters came back. Not all, enough. Visenya's hand was a blade even when it did not intend to cut. She wrote of the knives being counted on the other side of the water, of princes who liked the shape of their own chairs too much, of the men who would like to be his friends and the men who would like to be his friends until they were not. Rhaenys wrote stories. She wrote the taste of a pear from a tree in a walled garden that no one believed could grow on the island. She wrote the sound a foal makes when it realizes it can run. She wrote of a woman who sang a song in a kitchen while lighting a fire and how the words made the smoke move as if the song desired to cook with it. Aegon carried the letters in a leather pouch that had once held a chain and did not speak of it to anyone. It made him careful with his name, and thus it served the lessons well. He began to plan without drawing maps. He thought of beaches that would take a ship's belly without complaint. He thought of rivers that could be taught to bear gossip and not war if one learned to mind where they would overflow. He thought of men whose honor could be used without breaking it, because there are kinds of breaking that do not repair, and the knowledge of that is not weakness. He thought of women who had waited so long for justice that justice would appear to them as insult unless it was served with a hand that knew the measure of patience. He thought of how he would hold counsel, of how he would sit and tilt the table with a word so that the pieces arranged themselves while thinking it was the floor that had gone uneven. Nerys approved without approving. They did not speak of the continent Aegon intended to take. They did not speak of kings. They spoke of wind and of bowls and of jesses and of the way names can be split into parts and the way a man can speak one part to a lover and one part to an enemy, and how dangerous it is to think oneself immune to the confusion that results. On a night when the moon had hidden and the city seemed to be breathing out without breathing back in, Nerys came to him with a thing wrapped in cloth. The cloth had a pattern upon it that moved when one looked at it. Not a simple trick of eye and thread, but an intention. Nerys set it upon the table and unwrapped it as if unwrapping a child that had just come through fever. It was a lens. That is how his mind named it. A disk of clear matter that was not glass, backed with something that was not gold but wished to recall gold to those who saw it. It lay heavy in his hand and made the skin of his palm feel as if it had been told a story it could not now forget. "What is it?" he asked, whispering not because of secrecy but because loudness would have been a mistake akin to stepping into a river with boots filled with stone. "It is a way to see a map that cannot be drawn," Nerys said. "It is not ours. It belonged to a man who decided to use it to make himself a god. It did not agree. Where did he go? Where men go when they have burned through their names so quickly the world cannot sew them back in time," Nerys said simply. "What would you have me do with it?" "Use it to see the bright places in men's resolve," Nerys said. "The world will have you cutting through darkness and through the simple fog that lies on men's minds when they think of themselves as more comfortable than useful. But there is a way to cut through light as well, and that way is to see the bright hard edges that men cherish. If you can see those, you can move armies with fewer dead. You can move cities as if they were barges and not stones." Aegon lifted the lens. He held it up and looked through it at the wall. The stone swam as if it were being stirred. He set it down. "What does it ask?" Nerys did not answer immediately. That was answer enough in itself. When they spoke, it was with a care that he had come to recognize. "The way you will use it will depend upon how much of your future you are willing to give to other hands and which hands those will be. It will ask for hours that you could have spent in warmth. It will ask for quiet. It will ask you to be willing to be wrong in public without needing to correct what you cannot. It will ask you to permit men to think you are cruel when you are only precise, and to permit them to think you are soft when you are only careful. If you are going to take a continent, it will ask you to take the knowledge of how easily you could ruin it and hold that knowledge like a blade whose hilt is hot." "I can do that," Aegon said. "You do not yet know the weight of it," Nerys said. "Humility is a tool when it is chosen. When it is an accident, it is a wound. I do not intend to be wounded by it." "You will be," Nerys said, "but you will not show the scar when you should not. That is one of the things you do with ease." He took the lens to the roof. He waited until the dragon had done his circle, and then he held it up to the sky. Through it, the clouds were not clouds. They were threads. They were a hatchwork, crossed and recrossed with lines of force that had nothing to do with wind and everything to do with old conversations between sea and land and things that had once had names and had let them rot. He turned it toward the city. The roofs were black fields where lines gathered to become knots. There were knots upon knots in 3 places, one of them where the city wall leaned, and one where a market had no children, and one where the river bent as if trying to avoid something. He turned it toward himself. He did not see himself. He saw a space where lines refused to cross, a kind of modesty of force. He lowered the lens and laughed once under his breath because he had thought to be frightened and found that he was instead relieved. He wrote to Visenya again. He did not mention the lens. He wrote about the way the people here treated time like a thing that could be bribed with exactness. He wrote about winds with nicknames and about the way that sometimes the city spoke to him by allowing him to overhear something that could not have been said aloud. He wrote to Rhaenys about a cat he had seen perched upon a stair that was not a stair because it led nowhere, and how the cat had looked at him as if it had always known the man who would feed it when its own name tired it. He sealed the letters and sent them with a merchant who owed him a favor. As the ship left, Balerion made a shadow upon it that doubled it in the water. The merchant did not look up because he had learned the city's lesson about not counting what one cannot carry. On the day before the wind turned toward sea, Nerys took him one last time to the place of bones. The air tasted of coming change. The sky had decided its color and would not be persuaded otherwise. "There are things we have not taught you," Nerys said, and their voice had in it the low constant tone of truth that one hears in a temple when the chant has become breath. "We have not taught you how to lay hands upon a man's heart and make it beat in a pattern you prefer. We have not taught you how to send names into the mouths of mountains so that they tear themselves open. We have not taught you how to bind the dead to your service. Because you do not approve? Because those crafts require a kind of self-regarding that is not yet yours," Nerys said. "If you take the continent the way you think you will, perhaps it will never be yours. We have taught you how to listen and how to be specific and how to tie what you own to what you want without pretending you own more than you do. And a price," he said. "I am not fool enough to think I have paid it." "You have paid what you can pay now," Nerys said. "You will pay the rest with wakefulness. There will be nights when you will sleep and the city will use your sleep to teach you that you should not sleep. There will be mornings when you will wake and the first thing you will know is that if you do not choose the first word of the day with care, the last thing you will say at night will be something you cannot pull back out of the air. You will go among men who will believe that the thing that moves them most is the thing that is most true. You will remember that this is not so." Aegon looked at the bones and listened to the wind on them, each a flute waiting for a player less proud of breath than of music. "And if I return?" "You will not," Nerys said, and that was that. "Not by boat. I could come by dragon." Nerys did not deny it. They set a hand upon his arm. The glove was thin, and through it he felt the bones and the heat. "If you come on the wind will have to decide whether it loves you. It will either love you too well or not enough. Neither would serve this place. Go where you said you would go. Keep what you have said you will keep. Let the world argue for a long time about whether you were lucky or wise." Aegon thought of a map with a continent upon which the edges were old and the middle was older, upon which men had made lines and called them borders and then believed in those lines more than they believed in the rivers. He thought of the sound a dragon makes when the names in a man's mouth stop sounding like commands and begin to sound like the things in it that will never be turned. He turned to Nerys and bowed with the kind of respect he gave to men who had not asked him to be less than he was to teach him to be more. Balerion came to him at the shore, low as if he had decided to be a barge. The men loading the last of the casks moved slower because the world had become heavier around them. The ship would smell of him as a house smells of rye bread when all the loaves have been removed. The captain went about instructing his crew not to look too long. Even here, even now, men do not forget their habits. Aegon took the lens and the ribbon and the bowl that was not a bowl and wrapped each as one wraps a child who has seen a storm. He carried them himself. He set them in the cabin where he would sleep, and he placed his hand upon the lens, just once. As one touches the hilt of a sword, one does not intend to draw to be reminded of its weight. He went back to the deck and raised his hand to the city. He did not wave as men do when they want the ship to be told that they had left. He saluted, because that is what one does when one has been taught and has not betrayed the teaching. The sail took a bite of wind. The ship leaned as if pressing its shoulder into a door that would not open and then did. The city receded. It does not fade as other cities fade. It remains a mark upon the margin of one's sight until sight itself becomes something else. The river's mouth lay behind them. The sea in front of them lay with its old patience, the patience of stones set by water. Aegon stood and watched the place where the world had cut itself to make a harbor for what cannot be carried. Neressa's words came with him without following him. The first shadow of the first step. He thought of that and of bright edges and of wind with nicknames. He thought of Visenya's hand and Rhaenys' laugh. He thought of the old men with plans and the new men who were not yet old and had plans too. He thought of how to build a throne that did not make the one who sat upon it forget the cost of chairs. He let the thought move through him and then out of him again. That was another thing he had learned. A thought that will do work will come back when asked. Night came. The crew slept in shifts and the captain walked the deck with the even step of a man whose feet know every plank. Aegon went to his cabin. He unwrapped the lens. He set it upon the table. He lit a candle and let it burn for an hour and then another, as if the little ritual had acquired a right to be observed. He set the ribbon upon the table. He filled the bowl. It held no water, and yet there it was. He spoke a name into it that was thinner than it had been, and it answered with a softness that was not new and that would not tire him. He asked it to show him the first step of the act of crossing an ocean and being a different man upon the other shore. It hummed. It made a line. He closed his eyes and listened. Far above, Balerion sidled through the weather as if the sky were a room in which he had grown up and had never found a corner he could not reach. The wind he had taught to come when he called lifted and turned, and the sails responded like men relieved of a duty they had not realized had been weighting their shoulders. The ship took the water as if it were bread that softened in teeth. Aegon slept when he could, woke when it would serve, learned the new sound of the hull, which was no longer only wood and tar but also a quiet conversation between his name and what had been cut from it. Storms came and were not arguments. They were statements. He read them. He did not presume that because he could coax the wind, the sea would be his servant. He did not attempt to banish the weather that would have made his crew disrespect the ocean. He let his men learn where the fear belonged and guided it away from where it did not. When a sailor swore that he had seen a thing rise from the depths that looked like a city overturned, Aegon took his hand and said that the sea had many ways of asking questions and that the sailor should answer only the ones he could answer without giving away his name. At dawn, a pod of dolphins turned with them and then away. Aegon stood at the prow and held the lens to the line where sky met sea. Through it he saw threads that ran from that line into his bones. He smiled without showing teeth. He put the lens away. Land took shape as a suggestion one morning and as an inevitability by nightfall. The smell of it reached them before the line did. Green and damp and complicated, full of animal life and the human business of smoke. Dragonstone's jagged mouth rose from the sea like the result of an argument between two gods that had not been resolved. Balerion descended in a curve that was closer to affection than obedience. The crew ducked as if the sky itself had forgotten their names. On the wall, a guard saw him and saw him again. Bells began where bells begin, by the hands of a man who knows the rope as if it were part of the same name that his wife says when she is pleased. The harbor was its usual self, busy with a noise that would have been vulgar in any other city. Here it was a promise. Aegon stepped onto the pier and set his hand upon the post, whose wood had not known the thirst of Asshai's. It felt almost indecent to be touched by so much light. Visenya came like a blade. She did not hurry. She did not slow. She looked first at him and then, as if completing a check, at the ship, at the men, at the dragon who had seen the world and returned with him. Rhaenys came like a story. She did hurry. She put her hand upon his cheek and laughed the way a gate laughs when the hinges are oiled and the spring has come. "You were gone," Rhaenys said, and it was not complaint. It was the record of where the silence had been. "I was," Aegon said, and he let her hear the rest in the word. Visenya took his hand for a moment without any attempt at tenderness. It felt like sparring with someone who does not intend to show mercy during practice because mercy during practice makes one slow later. She held it until she had counted whatever it was she intended to count and then let it go. "You brought something back," she said, because it was her business to notice what men did not say they were carrying. "I did," he said, "and I left something." "Good," she said. "You look like a man who left something." They walked together toward the hall. Balerion took to a high tower like the night settling into place around a candle. Men bowed and looked up and pretended they had not done either. Aegon felt the lens in its wrapping and the ribbon coiled in its own rest, and the bowl that had no water at his back like a child in a cradle hearing the footstep that means food. At council, later, the old men and the young ones played their parts. They argued about ships that did not yet exist and taxes that would need to be collected from men who would resent it and roads that had not yet been laid across fields that were still only fields. Aegon listened. He cut when necessary. He let the talk do its own drowning when it began to fill with water. He spoke the word that set the table's angle right. He did not reach for the lens. He did not need to. He could see bright edges in the way a man sat when he thought he had made a joke that would cut deeper than the joke permitted. He could see where resolve would tear if pulled too quickly. He thought of wind with nicknames and he assigned them in his mind, not to men but to moments. In the night that followed, when the candles had been snuffed and the guards' feet had set their pattern upon the stones, Aegon went to the high place above the hall. He took the lens and held it to the night. The threads that came toward him were not the threads of a city that had trained itself to drink light. They were the threads of a place that had learned to wear fire and water both without presumption. He saw a line that ran west and another that ran south and one that ran under his feet into the foundations and into the rock and into the sea and farther still. He lowered the lens. He looked to where the stars had decided to make themselves known. He felt the dragon's breath warm upon his shoulder and the old stone cool beneath his feet, and between those two, stretched thin and resilient like a bow on the right string. He felt the name he had kept, the one he had thinned and tied and would not burn. Visenya came without announcing herself, because she was not a woman who knocked at doors she owned. She stood beside him and took the night into her eyes as if she were measuring it for cutting. "Well," she said, "it will require exactness," he said. "It always does. And patience. You have sisters," she said dryly. "You have learned something of that. And to allow men to be sure they despise what they will soon swear they love. That too," she said, glancing sidelong at him with a wryness that lived in the mouth but not the eyes. "And if the winds fail, we will teach them their names," he said, and set his hand upon the stone, which had the decency not to give up its coolness simply because he wished warmth. "Or we will walk, one bright edge at a time." The sea washed against the island. The sound was not the silence of Asshai. It was talk. It was promise. It was the patience of the work to come. In his chamber later, he set the ribbon upon the table and let a candle burn until it had the habit of burning. He did not speak his name into the bowl. He did not have to. The room answered him anyway, with the respectful attention of a servant who is about to show his master a place where the floor is uneven so that no one will notice the stumble but him. He sat. He let the wave of the day go out of him. He slept with his hand near the hilt of the life he had decided to begin. When dawn came, and people with it, and bread, and the noise of men who assume the day is theirs, the wind off the narrow sea had a new sound. It knew a nickname, and it liked being called by it. And far inland, beyond the ken of any on Dragonstone that morning, a man with an old title and a bowl of words in his mouth went to sign a letter with a hand that shook and would not. And then he set the letter aside and went instead to speak to a woman with the truth that would wound them both less than the lie. It was a small thing. It was the first shadow of the first step of the thing the world had already begun to think about when Aegon set his hand upon the black stone and asked it to be what it was. He went down to the yard where men were already arguing about the schedule for the day's practice. He took a sword. He moved in the method he had always had, but something in it had been altered. Less flourish, more path. The blade whistled with the efficient music of an argument that knows where it is going. Visenya watched him and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Rhaenys laughed at something one of the boys said to her about belts and fate, and she put a hand upon his shoulder in that way she had that made men act as if they had been knighted by a song. The dragon blinked in the sun, which had no difficulty here entering stone. Aegon would have time. Not as much as he would like, more than most men deserve. He would have wind. He would have names that would behave and names that would not. He would have a lens and a ribbon and a bowl and the memory of a city that had made him pay attention. He would have the exactness of patience and the necessary cruelty of precision, and the softness one owes to those whose lives will be lived under the narratives one shouts and writes and spends and burns. He had not brought magic home as men tell it later, in the fireside stories that make kings into an answer for children who cannot sleep. He had brought a habit. When he lifted his eyes west, the habit lifted with them, and the sea that lay between him and what men would learn to call a realm had already understood that this was a man who would not ask it to be less than it is. The wind listened. The world, which is made mostly of what does not care, took note, the way a river takes note of a stone by learning its proper name. Not so it can praise it, but so it can go around it without becoming smaller. He began to walk toward conquest as if toward a table where the bread has been set and the knives are already there and the guests are waiting to pretend they are surprised when he speaks. The day was ordinary. The preparations were the usual ones. The island smelled of salt and of smoke and of iron. The dragon made a shadow that lay at a certain angle on the paving stones and returned at that angle in the afternoon and then elongated in the evening and then was gone. If Aegon sometimes looked to the east while men assumed his eyes were west, well, that was the habit of a man who has learned to consider how things look while deciding how they shall be. He had learned aim for a wind. He had learned not to burn all the bridges on the way to a throne made of swords. He had learned that when one tightens a knot with both hands, one must also consider how to loosen it before it cuts off the blood. The city at the edge of the world became a story again, as all places do when one is no longer inside them. Aegon did not tell it to men who wanted stories. The story would leak anyway. Merchants would speak without speaking. A sailor would swear he had seen a dragon land upon a roof that did not fall and a light that was not fire. He let that be. His work lay ahead, and there was plenty of room in it for what remained to be learned. A man can spend his attention only once. He had chosen where to place it. The horizon waited with its old patience. The wind said his name as if tasting it to see if it had been made properly. The sea, who approves rarely and never admits to it, lifted him marginally and did not object.